So will today's report into the death of Princess Diana silence the conspiracy theorists? Even a basic search of the internet for the words Diana and conspiracy throws up hundreds of theories on how and why the princess met her death. For example, was it all a fake? Some argue that she and Dodi Al-Fayed planned the accident in order to get away from the media spotlight. Well then, was she murdered, as Mohammed Al-Fayed says? If so, by who? MI5, MI6, the CIA? But what would the motive for such a killing be? Perhaps she was pregnant. Conspiracy theorists say the British establishment had discovered that she was, but doctors who've seen her post-mortem results say she wasn't. What about Dodi? Was he the real target? Some conspiracy theorists claim business enemies of the Fayed family assassinated him in Paris, and that Diana's presence was simply a cover for their plot. Joining us now to discuss whether it's time to put all these Diana conspiracies to an end is the unofficial biographer of Mohammed Al-Fayed, author Tom Bower. He is in our central London studio. And joining us from Ipswich, the former MI5 agent David Shaler. David, is this the end of the conspiracy theories?
I don't think so, because it's very unlikely the Stevens report will come to definitive conclusions about certain evidence. The actual white Fiat Uno that was spotted hitting the black Mercedes in the tunnel has never been traced. A white Fiat Uno was traced to a paparazzo who was there on the day, someone called James Anderson, but he was found some months later, 250 miles from his home, in a burnt-out car. Now, the French concluded that was suicide, but suspicious people like me would say that has all the hallmarks of an intelligence service assassination. And certainly, he was telling his friends that he knew about the death of Princess Diana.
So what about Lord Stevens? He was chosen to lead this inquiry. Who would be influencing him, if at all, according to conspiracy theorists?
I'm not necessarily saying he's being influenced by anybody. What I'm saying is that until we trace the white Fiat Uno that hit the black Mercedes, there will always be question marks over the death of Princess Diana. There'll always be question marks as well about why the CCTV cameras on the French roads were not working that night. And why, for example, Mohammed Al-Fayed, somebody tried to sell Mohammed Al-Fayed fake documents implicating the CIA and MI6. This was a guy called Oswald Lewinter, who I know was an MI6 disinformation agent. And that's what's known as a strawman operation, to tempt Mohammed Al-Fayed into using those documents to prove his case. But of course, when they were proved to be fakes, the whole case would have fallen apart. But I think the British people can see through these things as well. We've got to bear in mind the Hutton inquiry was an absolute whitewash. The Scott report in the 1990s into arms Iraq gathered loads of very convincing evidence that there was wrongdoing. But the conclusions of these reports always give the intelligence service a clean bill of health, no matter what.
Tom Boyer, where will this end?
Well, it won't end, because Mohammed Fayed has a vested interest in keeping it going. But the truth is that the conspiracy theories are complete rubbish. Let me tell you why I know they're rubbish. I arrived at the Ritz Hotel where Diana and Dodi left from on their fateful journey 3 days after the crash with Mohammed Fayed's subordinates, the head of security and the pathologist. I was the first person to interview all the staff in the Ritz who saw Diana and Dodi in the hotel at the time and then leave. And my question to them, all of them, was Henri Paul drunk or not? Now, there was no doubt from my experience during those interviews, for the first time those people were being questioned, even before the police had been, that they were lying, that they knew Henri Paul had drunk too much in the hotel. But more pertinently, they were all surprised, and they admitted their surprise, that he was driving a car because he wasn't qualified. Yeah. And now there's just one final episode in this whole saga which I discovered in the Ritz, which has now become slightly blurred. Nobody knew before they left the hotel that they were taking this extraordinary route from the Ritz back to their flat on the Champs-Élysées. The only people who knew were Henri Paul and then Dodi and Mohammed Fayed himself. So there was no time for any intelligence agency to set up an assassination attempt, because nobody knew where they were going and when they were going.
Okay, well, let me ask you, Tom, then, why do you say that Mohammed Al-Fayed has an interest in keeping all of this going?
Because he essentially is responsible for the deaths of Diana and Dodi, because he agreed to the plan that Dodi hatched, that Henri Paul, who was not a driver but a security officer, should be brought back on duty, should be allowed to drive the car for which he wasn't qualified, and in this madcap scheme of going out the back of the hotel and racing like mad in a hired car back to the home. So he is a man who never wants to accept responsibility for anything. And you've got to remember something else. For Mohammed Fayed, that summer was just bliss. He had captured the most eligible woman in the world on his yacht and was hoping that they would marry his son. And it all went horribly wrong when his employee, a drunken security officer, crashed.
Okay.
So he's very upset.
Okay, we'll have to give the final word to David Shaler. Will this live on like the Marilyn Monroe conspiracy theories, like the JFK theories?
They will certainly live on because, as I say, there are so many unresolved questions. And, of course, Tom says he interviews the staff. And, of course, when they don't tell him what he wants to hear, he just says they're lying. And I know from talking to Mohammed Al-Fayed's security people that Henri Paul was not supposed to be driving them that night. He made the decision independently. And there's lots of independent evidence to show that he was working for the French intelligence services and possible other intelligence services as well. So we've got to ask questions about his whole role.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I suppose we'll all have to wait to see how Lord Stevens reports midday today, and the full coverage, of course, is live here on Sky News. But what will you think, David, when you hear what he has to say come midday?
Well, as I say, there's a long line in this country of people, there being whitewash inquiries and so on. There is a lot of evidence that the Stevens inquiry won't be able to deal with, to do with things like, I say, the white fear too. No, the fact that Henri Paul was working for other intelligence services, the fact that the Mercedes itself was replaced at the last minute. We're expected to believe that a brand new Mercedes wouldn't start and was replaced with another one. So Tom Bower's arguments about they wouldn't have had time to plan this, they could have quite easily done that. And we know that Princess Diana was to go to Palestine and start campaigning on behalf of the Palestinian people. And of course she took the world's media wherever she went. That would have meant that Israel, the state of Israel, would have been embarrassed to have cameras from the world's media showing how they are oppressing the Palestinian people, and they simply couldn't tolerate that. The only question really is who killed her. Was it Mossad or was it MI6?
I suppose that there's so many questions, but Tom, what about was Diana expecting? Was she pregnant? Was she going to marry Dodi?
Well, at the time in the hotel, there was no doubt that there was great excitement that Dodi had bought a ring for Diana. But in the fantasy world of Mohammed Fayed, that ring suddenly became an engagement ring. I don't think there was any realistic possibility of that at all. She, after all, was deeply in love with the Pakistani Dr. Khan. But, you know, the whole point about the Fiat Uno and everything else is, these are all conjectures. They're all based on eyewitnesses who are somehow suddenly disappear. The point is, she wasn't pregnant. Henri Paul was drunk. The decision that Henri Paul should drive the car was Dodi Fayed's, as approved by Mohammed Fayed. And the eyewitness to that, I must tell you, was the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones and Kes Wingfield. They heard Henri Paul say, Mohammed Fayed has approved the plan of me driving.
But there is a chance today, Tom, there is a chance with what we expect Lord Stevens to say for Mohammed Al-Fayed to perhaps bury his grief. He is a man in mourning, of course. What would you say to him? Do you think he should take the opportunity to accept the report's findings?
Well, of course he should, but he won't. I mean, Mohammed Fayed is a veteran fighter. He is a man who does not believe anything which doesn't suit him. And he will not give this up. Why should he? He's got a huge amount of support. David Shaler speaks for millions of people around the world who have accepted Mohammed Fayed's conspiracy theories. So he will just keep it on, and there's a whole industry out there who want to believe that this wasn't just a simple drunken crash, but some vast conspiracy, which I tell you again, could not have been planned, especially not by MI6. They're really an incompetent organization.
Well,
the idea they could have planned it is ludicrous.
As I say, we will all hear midday today, live here on Sky News. Tom Bower, David Shaler, thank you both for your theories. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you everybody who took part in the vote today. You believe that the conspiracy theories will live on. That's it for Sunrise on this Thursday morning. Here's the weather with Denise.